thanks again, April, for your time. Talk a little bit about your work and how you came to be a part of the franchise community.
Well, I started off, I'm an attorney and I practiced for 10 years as a prosecutor. And I prosecuted crimes against, I prosecuted crimes that were sexual assaults and murders mostly. So it's pretty heavy stuff. And I was looking to embrace my entrepreneurial spirit at that point and then decided to leave that and opened my first franchise. And then I grew that very quickly. We were the first in our area in our brand, and we grew to 4 locations in less than 3 years, ultimately to the point where we were in the top 20% of all earners in our brand. And I was only working 5 hours a week on the business. And I was the only owner out of 800 units to accomplish those 3 things. And so everybody wanted to know what it is that I was doing that was different. And I began consulting and sharing and helping other franchisees duplicate that, and then ultimately sold those locations in 2020 and opened my current company, which is Ask April Porter, that fills that gap for people between what they get with the franchise model and what kind of personal and professional development that they need in order to be able to scale without working themselves to death.
What are people doing wrong in terms of making that move into franchising? Some of the things, you're now helping people prevent.
Yeah, so a lot of it is the first thing is just making the assumption that the franchisor is going to give you absolutely everything you need to reach whatever your individualized version of success is. So each person coming into a brand has their own unique vision of what success looks like to them. And the franchisor is really responsible for giving you a concept in a business that when executed according to the model will make you profitable and quickly, right? It gets you to profitability quickly where you have this stable business. But so many people come into franchising from being an employee their whole lives, and they don't know anything other than being an employee. So they dive in behind the cash register, or they're making the sandwiches, or they're teaching the fitness classes, and that's their passion and they love it. And that works out great for the first couple of years until they're burned out and they just want a night off and a weekend off, and they'd like to take a vacation with their families. And the problem is that that's the real crux of it, is that you have to be able to switch from that employee mindset and being on that autopilot employee executioner into a bigger thinker, into strategies that you've really never been introduced to before, to become a true entrepreneur that can look at things at a 30,000-foot view and kind of be the conductor for all of the major players in the business, which should be your employees. But it just takes a whole new set of skills, a whole new set of strategies, and a completely different mindset. And so that's what franchisees need to realize coming in, that while the franchisor is going to give them the recipe, it's up to them to bring the flavor, right? They have to bring something to the table as well and develop themselves into being something more than they were in that job.
How do you offer that support? What are the products or services that you're helping individuals with?
Yeah, so we have 2 programs. One is called the Infinite Franchisee, and that's for that franchisee right where I just described, where they're ready to like they're just ready to call it quits almost because they're so burned out. They don't want to. They want their business to succeed, but they've been on that hamster wheel so long, they just don't know how to get off. And that's a 12-month program where we really walk people through, first of all, how do you even value your time? How do you recognize where you're spending it? And how do you change that mindset so that you value it in a different way, creating motivation and boundaries to change your daily actions? Then we go into, okay, great. Now you learned that. How do you get your team to take over some of the load? How do you develop them so that they want to take on more responsibility and so that they care about your business just as much as you do, so they will grow it while you're on vacation? And then the next thing we go into is everybody wants to know more about marketing, right? They think that that's why their revenues aren't growing. So we go through some marketing and advanced sales strategies, and then what we call our ownership cloning system. And that's where we really teach you how to put individualized processes into your business so that you can train one person. And then from that moment forward in your business, everybody in your business can train the next newbie, and you don't have to do that anymore. So that's what the infinite franchisee is. And then we have freedom franchisee, which is for the owner that's maybe already done some of that in their business. So people could move from infinite franchisee up, or maybe they have multiple units already and they've scaled them, but um, they're still working too much in their business, or they want to know, what do I do now that I've scaled? Should I buy more in my brand? Should I invest in real estate? What are some upper level strategies that people are doing when they're hitting that 7 and 8 figure mark in their business? So those are the two programs we have for franchisees.
That's great. Both sound like they'd be very beneficial for all the people you described that unfortunately don't make it work as quickly and successfully as they'd like to think when they first get into the business. Do you feel like you're glad you made the move and left your law career behind? Talk a little bit about that career fulfillment piece that you're now executing.
Yeah, well, it's really kind of strange because I don't feel like I've really left it behind at this point in my career. I've totally switched what I'm doing. But I talk to franchisees every day that are struggling and they need an advocate. And I really enjoy being that advocate for them. And when I say advocate, it's not always about, being marching on Capitol Hill to be an advocate, or, like getting in a fight with someone to be an advocate. It's just there to support them and to show them a different way than what they're doing now, and helping them safely, both emotionally and psychologically, make that transition so that they can achieve their dreams. um, and to do, because transition's hard, right? Change is hard. So just being that support, being that guide, and being that mentor to help them do it, I feel like I'm still advocating for the underdog when I do that.
That's great. The way you explained that, I mean, it makes sense because and I would imagine that some people, even though maybe you're not in a position to give it to them, would really be after some of that legal guidance too, because that's the other part that, like you said, if you're not ready to take everything on, I mean, you have legal ramifications based on your decisions that would come back on you now that you're the owner operator.
Right. And we get to talk about a lot of that stuff in the program, whereas the franchisor, they have to be super hands off when it comes to any type of legal questions. And we get to have those conversations where, should I hire employees 1099 or W-2? And what's the difference? And what's the pros and cons? And, what's the strategy behind each? We're having those conversations, as well as, like, oh, I have this great marketing idea. And it's like, okay, that's a great idea. But is that allowed in your brand? You need to go back and look at your franchise agreement, right? That may be something you're prohibited from doing. And people don't think about that. They just don't have a concept of the legal side when they think that they need to market and bring people through the door.
You left a previous career, embarked on a new one, and now have almost like a third act by going into more of the consulting. Talk about what it takes to make those changes, and why would you encourage other people to not be afraid, to try something new and have a mid-career switch?
Yeah, I think that so many times people settle. You just settle for the status quo because that's what you've been doing, and it seems so much scarier to make a change than it does to stay somewhere you're unhappy, or maybe just that isn't as fulfilling as it used to be, right? And our lives on this planet are very brief, and they're also pretty long. And I think that people sometimes forget that because we chunk it up into, oh, retirement is the next big milestone in my life, right? So I just have to hold out until retirement in this job. And the reality is that you can make a really, really big impact in a very short amount of time, particularly when you are following what I would say is your purpose. And I feel like that's what I've really done, is early in my career, I truly felt my purpose was to be advocating for victims of those violent crimes. And then there came a point where I felt like I had accomplished what I needed to accomplish. And I felt a pull to do something else. And I moved into franchising and that entrepreneur opportunity that had always been gnawing at me. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, it's not like you wake up one day and you're an entrepreneur. I mean, you've been thinking about it your whole life. There's just something that's trying to make you do it, right? And then what I learned in my time as a franchisee really showed me a gap that wasn't being filled. And I knew that I wish I'd had someone that I could lean on that was filling that gap. And I knew from talking to so many franchisees that they were wanting the same thing. And I thought, why can't I be that person? There's no reason why I shouldn't be that person, pick up that mantle and provide that service that so many people are needing.
That's so well said, and I appreciate your insight. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I loved our second interview, and I think it's maybe better than the first, so it was meant to be that we redid it.
I agree. No, the only other thing I would add is that our big vision, because it's pretty dang big, is to truly change the franchising industry, because I think that this gap really occurs from a lack of communication at the time that people are researching and buying a franchise. And I think by going back to the beginning and serving both franchisors and franchisees at the beginning, we could close the gap even earlier and set people up for faster and bigger success as a franchisee, which spills over to the franchisor. So that's just the other thing we're doing in our company is we've redefined the way that you develop a franchise from the franchisor side of things, and we're helping people do it so that their franchisees come out of the gate ready and on track to open multiple locations.
That's great and very much needed, as you describe. You're living what so many people sort of fail to completely vet before they write the check. So thank you
Right.
for that insight.